Hexaring is fundamentally a simple map by design, but the best players have a set of skills that allow them to win every time. Understanding of the map. The simplicity of this map and the way it works makes it the easiest thing a player can understand. Standing in the middle of the cylinder is the best thing you can do. Players often underestimate how much they have to run in order to stay in the center. At the start of the match, just hold your moving key forwards until you start to reach the very front of the cylinder. And once you reach the front of the cylinder but you need to move to the sides, you can run diagonally. Pan your camera to the edges to see where everyone is and then pick a side that has the least amount of people. Early to mid game is where you should be moving around the map the most. Running diagonally is a great way to move around the map, and it's often how I move around the map during most of the game. Late game is where you can typically pick a side and just stay there, but learning to move diagonally can greatly help you in the end game as well, especially if you need to apply pressure on other players. Typically pro players will apply pressure to other players just by being near them. If you're however in a situation where you're about to fall off the map and you see a tile above you, jumping to it will lead to your death. This is due to the fact that the cylinder rotates, and since it's coming at you, you'll hit the edge of the tile and bounce away and die. What you can instead do is try and run along flat ground and literally just hold forwards. Don't stop. If you don't get any flat tiles that are right next to you, instead of trying to jump forwards to a high tile, if you see a high tile towards your right side, jump to that instead. That way you won't be at risk of hitting the actual edge and then being boosted away. And another thing that I think is definitely worth knowing is that you can jump dive over a 2-tile gap. In this case, this leap of faith is worth taking. Conservation of tiles. The best way to conserve or save tiles is to run and jump over them. Sprint jumping or running while jumping is something that often people will say not to do in this map, but I disagree. If you do it right, you can sprint jump while running diagonally to go from one side to another. Slow jumping one tile at a time is also a great way to conserve tiles as well, but it's not something that you definitely should be using early game, but it's more of a late game technique. In general, learning to sprint jump around the map will help you be comfortable with maneuvering this map. Well, of course you should still run, but mixing this up with some sprint jumping is a great habit to pick up. If you see that your side is starting to lose tiles, see if you can go to the other side. Going to the other side is scary at first, but if you see where to go well in advance, you'll be fine. While learning does have its advantages, learning to sprint jump is a great skill to have. Split the aisle. What that means is towards the late game, pros will typically run down the center of the map and try to split the cylinder into two. This makes it much harder for people to come onto the other side. This is a great thing to do late game when the red tiles are the only ones left. Learning to put the pressure on the opposition is a tactic that helps pros win and is very underrated. Cutting people off. In maps like Hexagon, this is quite easy to do and the results are very noticeable. However, while slightly tricky to do in this map, it's still very much possible. You just walk in front of people who may be on the edges and just go to where they're going to be and just in general follow them. By doing this, you're going to apply pressure on them, which may cause them to move on or just play sloppy. I will typically do this very late game where its advantages are clearly visible. Let's talk about the common pitfalls that I see newbies players fall into every time. The first one is that they move too slowly at the start. Just really hold forwards or hold W and then feather off a bit once you start to reach the very front of the cylinder. Then once you reach the middle, proceed to scan the area and then run, or even better, sprint jump diagonally from side to side. The most egregious mistakes that I see newbies do is that without fail, I'll always see a newbie behind and the only thing they're doing is just running and jumping forwards. What instead they're supposed to be doing is actually just running forwards. While slow jumping does give you an innate advantage, at the beginning of the match it doesn't, and especially doesn't give you an advantage if you're all the way behind about to fall off. Newbies will also just run in a straight line. That's all the space they have. Don't be afraid to move around the map like you own the place.